Hello, everyone. Welcome to our October webinar where we're honored to have Tim and Eve Austin. And Tim and Eve have just completed a pilgrimage on El Camino, and we're excited to hear all about that. And I just want to say, these are two of my favorite people. When Linda and I were serving as area directors for Central Eurasia, we just had the joy of getting to know both of them, just model workers in Tajikistan and in Turkey. And they became close friends. It was fun to watch their children grow up, and now their kids are off and married and having kids like ours are as well. And I always go back in my mind to sitting at their table in Dushanbe, Tajikistan, and talking to their son Luke, who was a little guy about 3 years old. And I was quite a bit heavier in those days. And Luke asked me one day after supper, as we were doing something at the kitchen table together, if I needed a band-aid on my belly. And I just smiled. He was so cute. How could you get mad at a child like that?
Yeah. He thought you had an owie.
Yeah, I say yes, but I need a band-aid on my belly. I'll never forget that. One of those great MK moments that you'll never forget. And now he's married and he has a child, right? They've had a child.
Yeah, and another one on the way.
Yeah,
A 1-year-old daughter and baby number 2 coming in March.
right.
Well, maybe don't remind him of that. But anyway, it's a great memory in my mind and Linda's mind. So, Tim and Eve, tell us about yourselves, what you're doing before we get into the pilgrimage. Share with what you're doing now in your respective works that you're doing.
hmm Yeah, so we have been off the field officially since 2016. And so we were about 20 years, as you mentioned, Tajikistan and Turkey. And we had, a lot of memories with you and Lyndon. We appreciate you guys so much and our adventures together. I remember that Northern Afghanistan trip after 9/11 with you. That was fun, exciting, and all of that, and a little scary sometimes, but yeah, we are back. So we've been, like I said, 2016, and we different roles, but one of the roles that really we just kind of fell in love with when we were still overseas was supporting and encouraging and coming alongside cross-cultural workers in a member care type of role. So Eve with her counseling and me mainly with my coaching, some mentoring, and so we just kind of fell in love with that piece of what we did at that time. And so when we transitioned back to the States, that was really our goal, to continue to do that, but in a way that was sustainable for this season of life that we were going into. And Eve eventually started her counseling practice, and I have a coaching practice. And that's what we do now. We come alongside ministry leaders and cross-cultural workers, and love to do that. And of course, I love to do that not just with our one-on-one practice, but we love to come alongside groups like we did with the El Camino, and we'll talk about that a little bit with you today. And yeah, anything else to add? But
Yeah, and so Tim has his coaching business now, and I have a private practice. So I am licensed in the state of California and the state of Idaho. We live in Idaho now. We've lived here for almost 3 years. And so about half of my client load is Idaho and California folks, and the other half is global workers. And yeah, so we have ordination with the Assemblies of God, and we've continued to work in ministry circles here in Southern Idaho and then with global workers. So don't tell the rest of my client load, but my favorites are workers and then adult TCKs and TCKs. So yeah, I love being able to spend at least 50% of my time on the screen, but with people all over the globe supporting them.
I've heard excellent things about both your work as coaching and counseling as well. And I would just recommend anybody, if you need a coach or a counselor, contact Tim and Eve. You couldn't find any better, especially with their copious experience in the church and overseas. Just stellar and stellar people, just the real deal in every way. I know that's said a lot, but I know from experience in being with these folks. And Yes, that Afghanistan trip was a trip of a lifetime. Just 2 weeks
Yeah,
into the
it was.
we were.
Yes,
Interesting. Holy Spirit leads and opens doors, but that's a webinar all into itself. Bit
yeah, yeah, it would be for sure.
of a pilgrimage, also.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we want to get in and talk about your most recent trip to El Camino, and also about the one that precluded that you did a couple years ago as well. And the promotion we've done for this is looking at Christian pilgrimage in the realm of holistic formation, body, mind, soul, spirit, vocation, because we are not people who are chopped up into parts, but we are a whole. And how do all aspects of these areas apply into our life to grow and to steward ourselves the way God would have us to? And so I just want to ask you, first of all, so why a pilgrimage? Why would we have to go on a pilgrimage to experience something in our lives that God would want to do to enhance us in Him and with other people as well?
Yeah, good question. One good reason is because taking a chunk of time away, the two that we've done have been a week long. So taking a chunk of time away from whatever you do in your normal day-to-day life just opens up space for heart, soul, mind, and body work that can't be done, or it's difficult, let's say, for it to be done in shorter chunks. We practice silence and solitude. We'll take long hikes. We'll do, days away or even weekends away. But it's very different. Like a 2 hour to 2 day silent retreat or spiritual retreat, as opposed to a week where you're just every day you just have that time and space. And in this case, the pilgrimage, you're on the trail every day, doing, yeah, we did 11 miles we averaged a day. So it's just a lot of time walking, and you're seeing beautiful things and you're in community. So there's the iron sharpens iron aspect of it, and then also practicing silence and solitude, or we did, so that it's time with the Lord, time with your thoughts, time to pray and process,
Mhm.
and just really soak it all in. So pilgrimage allows for those things in a way that just, yeah, it's just hard to get to
Mm.
that spot emotionally and spiritually if you don't have a bigger chunk of time.
Yeah, and I think that piece. When I think of how Jesus walked with his disciples, and got from place to place, it took time to get to those places. Can you imagine? And we get a little, brief windows into some of the conversations that took place. But can you imagine all that time of just walking, journeying together, and having the space to have these deeper conversations? So there is a community component to it for sure. But then there's also, like Eve said, that silence and solitude piece where you can intentionally step back, and then we try to build this into our experience, that there is enough time, ample time for silence and solitude, as well as really connecting at a heart level with other people, at a deeper level, deeper conversations.
Interesting that you mentioned Jesus on the roads of Palestine, of Israel, and you think about pilgrimage in the scriptures, and really Jesus just wasn't going from one place to another, but there were things that God was doing along the way. I think of John 4:4 when it's interesting that it says he had to go through Samaria, and
Mm.
everybody with him, that's the last place they would have wanted to go through, but they did. And of course, the great story of the woman at the well and the conversation that's had there, and the revelations that he brings into her life, but also the revelations that came into the apostles' lives as well, at least the future apostles' lives also. But then I'm thinking about Abraham coming
Mm.
from Ur and his pilgrimage and his movement eventually into the promised land, and Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, time and time again, the children of Israel, the whole theme of being on the way or journey and
Mm.
what God does along the way is replete throughout the Bible. So there really
Yeah.
is a great theology to pilgrimage if we study it and think about it in the Old and the New Testament as well. Even Paul's journeys, the missionary journeys in various places that
Yeah.
they. So, yeah, just even thinking why there's a deep reason that has a great scriptural foundation too.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, and if we just think of the pace, Mark, of modern life, one of the other pieces is we encourage people that we pilgrim with to do a digital detox. So the pace of life now is fast. It's noisy. There's a lot assaulting our senses, and it's really difficult to filter through all of that when it's still coming at you at that pace. So to step back from all that and turn it all off, and just, yeah, the silence and the lack of all of that, like periphery noise, just really can be so healing. And so I mean, you don't realize how bad you need it until you do it, and you're like, oh wow, that's exactly what my soul needed, right? So yeah, but the pace of things, if we're looking at New Testament or biblical models, is just, yeah, everything was slowed way down
Mhm.
because they didn't have all the digital noise and stuff too. But yeah, I think we have a lot we can learn from how Jesus was doing things, right?
Right. Yeah, this is a good place to begin. Jesus, that's a great idea.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Who would have thought?
And I even think of like the examples Jesus used in his parables and his teaching. Look at the birds of the air, the flowers of the
Mm,
field. Like those kinds of there's a level and a degree of that you open yourself up to on a journey like the Camino, of noticing, of awareness, the big things, the little things. Like we would pause at times along the trail, Mark, and just uh, marvel at a butterfly or a flower or a slug on the ground, or but then you would open up your eyes this particular section was beautiful of northern Spain, to the coastal, we were along the coast a lot of times, so the big vistas and the
mm,
mountains and the beauty of that. So there's so much to notice, and then there's so many potential metaphors that come in there, and
Mhm.
examples of God's love for us.
Well, with that thought in mind, just with your experience, and then I'd like for us to eventually get into like how does this even happen? Because I'm sure a number of people that are going to be watching this, and I'm in the midst of it now because we're doing it right now. But just how do you begin to even think about doing a pilgrimage like this? But let's put a little bit more of the benefits before we get into the actually doing a pilgrimage and getting ready for it and all that entails. But when it comes to the benefits, one of the things that just stood out to me when you were talking is that it sounds like just the natural order of things, the creation of God, the natural revelation that Scripture talks about that's out there, that we, to everything Eve said about, I love that digital detox. Wow. Um, I think that's something we're so steeped in that we don't even have an
mm,
idea of how toxified we are,
yeah.
in need of a detox, because we use it all the time. So, what are some of the, if you don't mind sharing, that the personal on this particular pilgrimage, maybe even to the last one, what are some things that you took away from that that have been really transformational to you in your total walk with the Lord?
Mhm. Yeah, I'll share I'll just read it because it's a quote that I found. The author is B.T. Harmon. And we just arrived back a week ago today, so it's all kind of raw for us. That was our second Camino, but honestly, we're still really processing, like your question there, Mark, the things that really impacted us. We've journaled, we've talked about it, we've talked about it with the people who went with us, done some debrief, but it's still quite raw. But these words helped me put some of my thoughts into words. The Camino has truly captured my heart. The best way I know to describe it is as an intense emotional cleanse and spiritual cleanse. The exhaustion, struggle, challenge, and wonder are like a rolling pin, pressing, purging, and flattening every little malignant lump of anxiety out of your soul. I think we've forgotten our primal needs: movement, light, water, dirt, laughter, a destination, and an unclenched mind. the unchanging fundamental compounds of joy.
Mm.
So yeah, just some of the way that that author worded that, I was like, yep, that's what I've been thinking, and that's what's been rolling around in my heart and mind. And I don't know if this rolling pin metaphor, some people would go, oh, no, thanks. You know, I'll skip the rolling pin, but actually it feels really good to roll, you know, as the author says, every little malignant lump of anxiety out of your soul. It feels really good. Highly recommend it.
Hmm.
That is, I'm writing this down because that's what stood out to me. The whole idea, he writes about the cleansing and the exhaustion.
Mhm.
You know, initially, some people would be thinking, well, that's not for me. You know, I just, the cleansing part, well, that may be okay, but the exhaustion, um, how does the exhaustion, I mean, this is something, a quote you identified with, how did the exhaustion part help you? Why at the end of an 11-mile day, you know, did
Hmm.
you feel like, wow, I'm glad I did this today? And I'm glad I get
Yeah. It's really there's a grace element, I think, to this whole thing that you know, leading up to it, and we've heard this now, we've experienced it ourselves and had our own concerns about our ability to deal with some of that exhaustion and the discomfort and foot pain, whatever you might be experiencing. Um, and we've heard it from others that we've led on the trail as well. And how the common theme seems to be like there's this grace that just God's sustaining grace that comes in, and you get off the trail. You are exhausted, but you're also like Eve was reading here and talking about is this whole just this sense of accomplishment, but also not just self accomplishment, but just I've walked with God, I've walked with others, and this is it's a refreshing and renewing place to be when you're not in the same space you've been all these past months, and you come and you set aside this time. So there's a, even though your body, there's another quote that I was going to share too, by Belden Lane in his book Backpacking with the Saints. He says, my body began to enter the place in a way my mind hadn't yet been able to. And that just kind of is really, I think, you're we don't pay attention enough to our bodies usually, when we're just going from our day to day and experiencing exhaustion maybe in a lot of in different ways. And so this is a different type of tiredness and exhaustion, but it's also a grace infused one that, like Eve said, you just don't maybe find that in a smaller chunk of time, and
yeah,
discover that, and so grateful for it. You know, so I think most of the time there was a sense of gratitude. Grumpiness sometimes, yes, we would experience a little bit of that too when you got you know, you getting hungry or dealing with some aches and pains, so a little bit of that as well. But even in that, you know, as community, you got an opportunity to support each other and encourage each other, and
Mhm.
yeah.
And you keep going because the destination is already decided, or the way we've done pilgrimage is we know one of the days actually we did 18 miles, and that was so then we could have another day that was a 5 mile day because we wanted like a whole afternoon and evening for rest. And so anyway, you keep going, you know, you're after like 10 miles, your body's like, okay, I'm tired now. But dinner and a hot shower and a bed is at the 18-mile mark. So you just keep going. You know, you're just like, okay, I'm gonna get there. And your mind just, yeah, you put your mind on other things. And it's our bodies are, I mean, just the way we're designed, the way we're created is amazing. And most of us don't really push ourselves to our limit and then beyond our limit because of fear or anxiety or insecurity or those kinds of things. So this just kind of like blows all that out of the way, and you just keep walking. It's really cool.
I, you know, there, I think in a lot of our traditional church circles, uh, there's this great dichotomy that we create between body and spirit. And you think of the verse Paul talks about, bodily exercise profits little. Well, people have built a whole theology of not taking care of themselves out of that. I think
Yeah.
being close at one point, but just realizing how vital being healthy is to our total formation,
Yes.
stewardship of who we are in body, mind, soul, spirit, and vocation. And I love what you're saying, because that one quote by Belden, where the body was speaking things to the mind. There's a lot of teaching right now in the realm of science and neuroplasticity that many times our bodies are informing our minds, not merely our minds informing our bodies, which is a traditional path that we've often taken. That your body's telling you something. So this exhaustion that you experienced, I mean, it sounds on one hand very difficult, but on the other hand, it sounds like, well, that's something I would just love to do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we talked about that. We would debrief with our group in the mornings before we set up back on the trail, and we talked about how that was another grace, God-given grace for us, like because you would experience some pain or discomfort as you're going along, and you can choose to either pay attention to that and to focus on that, or there's so many other pieces or things around you that you could focus on. And so just kind of remembering that there's so much I could focus on, and whether it's looking out at the sea or noticing something along the trail, whatever that might be, it seemed to help take our minds off of some of the what our body was trying to shout to us. And so there is that mind body connection, and sometimes struggle to get how do you get alignment there? Yeah.
Because that hold both principle, but if we're talking about heart, soul, mind, and body, we're holding these four things. And yeah, whatever our body is saying, it might be tired and we need to sit and rest, or we might need hydration, or we might need to stop for a snack, or slow our pace. So we're listening to our body, but then also, like Tim is saying, yeah, holding both that with like, wow, that is a beautiful view. And God created all that for me. And it energizes you, and you're like, yeah, I feel tired, but whatever's up ahead is amazing. I don't want to miss that.
Yeah. What you've been talking about just pulls in so much of being in touch with our physical self. And I'd like to talk a little bit later on, like, how do you prep yourself physically for something like this? I mean, it isn't something I'm sure you just jump into, like you're going to run a marathon. Well, if it's next week, you may better think about next year's marathon and not next week's marathon. But, I love what you said earlier, Tim, about the dynamic of accomplishment in your walk with God and others. So this was something. So you talk about the physical dynamic, but you're talking about God, the spiritual dynamic, but then also with others is very much a soul or relational dynamic. So could you guys expound a bit more? What came to you in your relationship with God? I know you said you're still processing just being off this for a week, but some things that maybe came to the forefront with God that perhaps if you had not done this, that revelation wouldn't have been there. And then also the soul dynamic, which I look at as being relationships with others. Um, as you said, I mean, anytime you're doing something hard with other people, my mind keeps going back to football practice or track practice. Sometimes you get because your sugar's dropping or things aren't coming out the way they should, and you know, and you know, there could be tensions in relationship. That's just normal. But could you expound on those two things?
One thing that comes to mind for me in terms of really how I experienced God's grace and love during this time was the space to step back and to really reflect on, is all my doing aligned with my being? Am I doing what really matters? Maybe you could say that. Or is what I'm doing flowing out of who I really am and the core of what God has called me to do. And so kind of like really that space and time to step back and get those two aligned a little more because we can go and go and go without giving enough thought and reflection and thought around how those two, the being and the doing pieces are aligned or not aligned. And so that was really a takeaway for me this time.
Mhm. Yeah. A big takeaway for me was, and probably in conjunction with finishing a book called Surrender to Love, which is David Benner, not long before we left, or I might have finished it on the plane actually going, but the quote that hit me was, allowing myself to deeply experience his love, taking time to soak it in and allow it to infuse me has begun to affect changes that I had given up hope of ever experiencing. And
Mm,
so it's the simplest thing, like experiencing the love of Christ, and letting it soak in and infuse me as Benner says. But that it for me, it was just a whole week of that, like
mm,
a flower that was his love letter, the sea that was his love letter. Like everything I saw was a love letter to me, which that again sounds so simple, but a lot of times I see it as something that I'm supposed to offer to others and show to others. And yeah, I do my best to do that. But then, wow, to be receiving that every day myself and be
mm.
infused with that every day myself at a personal and spiritual level was, yeah,
How about the
amazing.
element of walking with others? I love what you just said, Eve. And when you have something like that, Benner's books are. Oh, I've not read a Benner book I haven't liked
Right.
and gleaned a lot from. But the the dynamic of being in that, and then with people,
Hmm.
thinking of the great commandment, loving God and loving people.
Mm,
Uh,
Hmm.
mhm,
what what do you feel like came out of that? In your time with these people on this trail for 11 miles a day, or 18 and 5, what were some good revelations that came out of that kind of intense community, maybe with people you didn't even know?
Hmm. Yeah. And this trip, both times we've done it, we've known everybody, but they haven't known each other. So they were gelling or meeting each other for the first time and gelling. And yeah, so for me it was, yeah, it was people we knew and people that we had a sense already that the Lord was putting together this combination of people, and also that these people were at the places in their lives where they had something. We use the words release and receive. So for each day, we're asking the Lord, what do you want me to release, and then what do you want me to receive? And so yeah, we just feel like the Lord handpicked the people that we did the Camino with, as people who, yeah, he was calling them into or inviting them into a release and receive journey, and then yeah, for us as well. So we got it, yeah, to lead it, but then also be in process like that, which is, we're taught, or we're, yeah, previously, let's say, our idea of leadership was more of like, you get it together so you can lead others in a way that, yeah, anyway, they feel like you've got the answers or you've got this figured out kind of thing, which we never have had all the answers or had it figured out. So that's always been a challenge, until we realized, like, no, we're gonna lead from this place of brokenness. We're gonna lead from this place of humility, which you and Linda actually modeled that for us, Mark. So thank you. Like the ways that you guys were so authentic with us, and the ways that we just realized, no, these are real life people. They're raising their kids. They're doing all the things that we do.
mm,
And yeah, we honor you as leaders, but also just felt like you were approachable and real. And yeah, so we lead in that way, or strive to lead in that way. So that community aspect of the journey really let us do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love all of that. That release and receive. That just to me
mm,
is so powerful and so freeing. What great words! I'm reminded of a prayer that I try to encourage spiritual directees to enter into, where when you are in contemplative prayer, when you're in silence and solitude, and there's no music, there's nothing except you and God, you're in the raw with God, and then things come up, which is a good thing, because a lot of times, even through spiritual formation practices, we can suppress things that God wants to bring out of us. And when we're in the raw with Him, they come up, and it's wonderful to say, Jesus, I welcome you into, and Jesus, I release it to you.
Mm-hmm.
Welcoming Jesus into it, and then letting Him take it away, and the freedom that comes with that. And when you said release and receive, wow, that was brought me to tears. That's so deeply powerful and meaningful for all of us. And
Yeah.
what a
And
great
how we can't, oh, sorry.
piece.
If I got a coffee cup in hand, if Tim tries to give me his coffee cup, can you try yours? Cheers. My hand is full. I can't take that coffee cup. If I set this down and he offers it, my hands are free. I can receive what he's giving me, right? So same way with Jesus. I think he's always wanting to give us something. He gives us good gifts every day. But if our hands are clenched and full of, whatever, that anxiety, that to-do list, that whatever, like, yeah, release it. And now my hands are open. I can receive, So anyway, yeah, I love the metaphor.
It's interesting to how much you realize how much you're holding on to control sometimes during this experience, because um you're letting go, and you have the time and space to actually this is kind of interesting, but you to take it back up again, to take up that worry or that thought that some of our folks are in big transition seasons, and so um there's a temptation to go back there in terms of anxiety or what's next, to the questions that necessarily don't need to be answered at this time or can't be answered at this time. So there's that ongoing piece of release and receive throughout the day as you engage with that. And so when we debriefed with the group, in the mornings, we would talk about that. What were you able to release? What did you find what was a struggle there? What were you able to receive? Another kind of question we came up with, which is just we tried to mix it up a little bit. What was the question? What was a win? What was a wonder? And what was a want? And that's kind of another thing that people like to engage with. And a win could have been anything from, yesterday as we were walking, I was so grateful that we came on this little village with a coffee shop, and I got to have a cappuccino. So it could be something like that. But I wonder when I'll get my next cappuccino.
Or we found a porta potty just at the right moment.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But what do you want? What do you desire? What is God putting in terms of deeper desires? What do you want to experience as you go out today? So it was a great time. The relationship piece of it, as you're asking about, I think that was just a great time to go deeper with people.
Wow. I mean, just again, the whole body, mind, soul, spirit dynamic at work there. I love that question of what was your win, your wonder, and your want. That is those are just great questions to reflect on. And
try that on Linda tonight at dinner.
Yes, I will. So I'm not afraid of what the answers may be, but I have to pull out more band-aids. But let me ask you this, because I'm sitting here thinking about now you're back in Idaho, and how does the journey continue for you from what you gleaned from it? How does this now, what I've taken from this incredible literal journey, which El Camino means on the way, correct? My
Yes.
Spanish wife were here, she'd be able to tell me, yes, Mark, that's what it means. But so how does the way continue for you in Idaho as a coach, as a counselor, as a parent to in-laws, as a grandparent? I mean, how does it now get into the rub of life in Idaho?
Good question. That's the challenge, honestly. It's a big challenge to be in that bubble I mean, we almost didn't come home, honestly, because we were like, oh man, if we could stay for just one more week, you know. But because it does, you end up, you know, realizing you're in this bubble, in this sacred space that doesn't translate to your Western life or your ministry life or whatever bubble you're normally in, that does really require a pace and a, you know, there, yeah, it's just, there's a lot of responsibilities. And then for people in the middle, like we are, there's, we have sandwich generation, you know, parent care, kids, grandkids, you guys get it. So, there's just, yeah, all the responsibilities and demands. And so, yeah, it's a lot of how are we going to continue to Sabbath well? How are we going to continue to practice our spiritual rhythms, even though in this version of it, our Idaho real life version of it, it's that, you know, 24 hours each week and you know, a chunk of time each day, and our daily rhythms, weekly rhythms, and getting away. We're going to go camping at the end of the month, so that'll be a weekend rhythm or a, you know, 3-day getaway thing. So anyway, keep it woven into real life in a way that keeps us healthy and keeps us on this journey, essentially.
Mhm.
You're being intentional.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's there's that's the rub, right? I mean, you get back in life, the pace of life uh is picks up, accelerates very quickly. So just but there's a residue, you know, our, you know, by faith, I really think there's a residue, there's a formation that happens, there's some deeper spiritual work that goes on in our lives during the Camino. And I think that is for overall wholeness and health and you know, and balance. I think that's just a contributing factor to how now we can come back and perceive and discern, like,
Mm.
what really does matter and how are we aligning ourselves with that. Like, it just is a real good reminder.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Did you talk about those kind of things when you were actually doing it? Like, okay, I'm really getting something in so many of these areas. I definitely have to bring this back home and
Hmm.
not make a big program out of it. This, I need to just weave this into my life.
Hmm.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, I don't think we talked a lot
Not
about
too much.
you know, what we would weave in coming back, because it's just it's happening. Yeah, it's just hard to put it into words. It's so intangible,
Mm.
and it's just happening all along the way. And I mean, honestly, for me, I try not to think about real life when I'm on pilgrimage, because it kind of spoils it.
I think more in the reflection process afterwards. So now I think I'm engaging more with that
Yeah,
mark a little bit. And
yeah,
even in this conversation with you, you know, thoughts are stirring, you know,
yeah.
how can we, you know, be intentional?
Hmm.
And so that's always going to be yeah, I think the takeaway is it's important. One takeaway is prioritizing that time to reflect, whether you journal or have these these conversations around this to so that there continues to be some alignment with Sabbath and um, really engaging whole body in rest and renewal and all of that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
As you're saying, I'm kind of chuckling to myself. I remember when Tim, when you and I came out of Afghanistan in December of 2001, when we went in, we were traveling such terrible roads in northern Afghanistan to get to where we were going. And then somebody had the idea of why don't we travel the riverbeds to
Oh,
get Afghanistan
yeah.
back to where we're going? And those were actually, the riverbeds were better than the roads. But then somebody, oh, yeah, the Soviets planted a lot of mines in the hills, and when it would rain, they would roll out into the riverbed. So really watch out in those riverbeds because there's a lot of mines left over from various wars. It was like, okay, well, I'm glad we didn't hit those landmines. We made it out, you know.
Yeah.
Right.
Like that, you know, not a landmine of destruction, but really the dynamic of revelation. And it's going to be interesting. It'd be great to have you on again in the future to look at post and see what kind of things, this is what we've carried over into
Yeah.
daily life from that journey. Because
Mhm.
and obviously it just wasn't meant for that period of time, but to shape and transform your lives overall until Jesus comes or you breathe your last, right? I mean, that's the kind of investment he makes into us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into some real practice now. We have about 15 minutes left. And so let's say that next year we're going to join you on, let's say, the El Camino. And we are now thinking about it a year from now. What should we be doing holistically to readying ourselves? You know, everything from the calendar to walking more, our
Yeah.
daily
Maybe.
Mhm.
real practice on how would we prepare to take a journey, a pilgrimage like you did, with all of these holistic kinds of ends in mind.
Mhm. Yeah. We did this last one in well, in 2022 we just did it with another couple, some friends that were also workers in Tajikistan. But this one that we just finished, we did in partnership with a nonprofit called The Way Between. And we will put contact info in the show notes. But they are a great organization to work with. Jeff and Sarah Simons, they lead. He leads men's only caminos, and she leads women's only caminos. And we highly recommend that to anyone who's interested in doing it just as men's or just as women's groups. So this couples camino was the first that the Way Between has ever done. And we loved it, and it did work well. So we are hoping to do it again if we have that opportunity. And the Way Between, they have written a guide which is everything you need to know basically when it comes to the practicality. There's a packing list. There's a training that if you've heard of something like Couch to 5K or Couch to 10K, it's that same kind of idea. So people could start from zero, like not being a person who hikes or treks at this moment, and they could train and be ready for it, yeah, in 9 months or so. And about 6 months if you're already active and you're already doing hiking and
Mhm.
trekking. So anyway, yeah, it just works you up step by step to the distance you need and all the things that you need to go into that. And also things like, travel insurance and forms, yeah, all the things they provide all of that, or not provide it all, but it's a step-by-step guide to help you work through all of that. For
Mhm.
this one we just finished, we were communicating with people about 14 months out, and they were committed at about 10 months out, I think. So that because finances, people are saving up for it, training, people are working up to
Mhm.
it, that kind of thing. And then calendars, just let's be realistic about how quickly our calendars fill up. Yeah, most of us already have things on the calendar for the next year or two. And so, yeah, something big like this where you need a whole week blocked out, you got to plan for that, obviously.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
Mhm.
so the Way Between is a great organization to work with because they have all of that done. All
Mhm.
of the back house stuff is
Mhm.
ready to go, and quality really done well.
Done well. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so there's a not only just like how to prepare physically, but also equipment wise. So there's a whole list of recommended equipment, from shoes to hiking poles to type of clothing. Um, yeah, you name
Shopping
it.
list, yeah.
Yeah, so a great list to go off of, and then we have what we did, which is really effective, is to have we have a series of Zoom calls with the team, with the group that is joining us on the Camino pre Camino. So we'll have those calls every so often leading up to the Camino to just how are you, just check-ins and see how everybody's doing, questions. So by the time you're going on the Camino, you're really, I think people feel pretty prepared
Mhm.
because of what's built into the program.
Excellent.
As
Well,
prepared as you can feel if it's your
Mhm.
first time. So
Right, right. The the aspect of the physical aspect of it. Um, I think looking at it's important, like you've said, the calendar, the equipment element. I mean, these are all great questions. My first thought came to my mind. I want to do this next year with Linda, and thank goodness we're in the mecca of Bass Pro because I'm sure they have everything we need.
Yes.
Right.
So, but beyond that, I think about, like I've talked about getting back my health and all this, but I'm sure for something like this, I probably have to ramp things up a bit more. I'd have to get in more steps a day and this kind of thing, and get on the rowing machine, whatever it takes. But what would you say? You guys are what, in your mid 50s? I'm 66, and you said that your sister Tim went on this, right? She's
Yeah,
66.
66 as well. Yeah, and
Mhm.
she did awesome.
Mhm.
She was ahead of us a lot of the time. So, but she's pretty disciplined and just exercising and things like that at home,
Mhm.
and kept herself in shape. But there's a progression that we kind of recommend for, like Eve said, if it's 10 months, 9 months out, you have to prepare. There's a progression of how many, kilometer miles, should we say? Like we can just talk miles hiking. Can we start with? Can I do a couple miles? Can we move up to 4 or 5 miles? Can we then get to a point where if we can have a couple, say 8 mile, even, hikes, 8 to 10 mile hikes pre-Camino, um, we're going to be fine. You're going to be fine, for a 10 or 12 mile a Camino hike. So we, you know, put in some hills there, nothing too real rigorous, but put in some climbs and yeah, we live in the beautiful state of Idaho where we have a lot of trails and a lot of places to hike. We never hiked the same place once during the summer months leading up to the Camino. Some people lived in Houston and they had to get a little more creative about how
Mhm.
they did their walks and their hikes. But yeah, just to kind of you can make it work wherever you are. It's just yeah, adapting to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might be getting in the gym through,
Yeah, yeah,
winters in Idaho. That's all we have.
yeah,
Or yeah, we can snowshoe or we can go to the gym. Those
yeah.
are choices.
Wow. Wow. So if people are thinking about doing this, um, you've gone through some logistical kind of things. Anything that you would say to them just spiritually, how to prepare themselves as well? Uh, what are just here's some things that we like, especially before your first Camino. I'm sure the second one, you had that experience behind you, but before, what would you just share with people to start preparing themselves in that kind of way?
Mhm.
Mm,
Yeah, there's a number of resources again offered or they're compiled by the Way Between. They have a great resource list. There's movies that have been produced about the Camino. There's a lot of podcasts. There's a lot of, there's whole books. There's, all kinds of great resources. So exposing yourself to those resources in whatever form, if you like to listen or read or watch, and then it just gets the wheels turning. Not that your pilgrimage is going to look exactly like that, of course, but it's just going to help you to see kind of what it's looked like for other people, and yeah, just the reality of what that looks like every day. It's kind of this simple, it's almost too simple in the best way, which again is back to the digital detox and this, the rolling pin metaphor. You want all of that to be released, and so you're just getting up, you're putting on your pack, putting on your shoes, eating some breakfast, getting on the trail. And at the end of the day, you take off your pack, you take off your shoes, eat a good meal, take a hot shower, and sleep it off, and you do it again the next day and the next day, the next day. So it's like Groundhog Day in the best way. um which like we're talking about how to prepare, but then how can we prepare ourselves for something like that in the Western world that doesn't really allow for something like that?
mm,
But we did actually we went camping and we did hike back to back days. We do recommend at least 2 days in a row, because then you know what it feels like to
mm,
have, you're 8 miles on the trail one day and then maybe another 8 the next day, and you're kind of sore, but it's fine. You just get up and go, and the kinks start to work out, and you just, yeah, you're like,
Mhm.
okay, I'll do that, and I'll do that again, and I'll
Mhm.
do that again.
And
I
I
think
and I think too, Mark, from going back to that preparation spiritually, I think these connect points pre-Camino that we had with our group, like they're really beneficial for like hearing each other's, well, again, going back to wins, wonders, and what are or some just telling your story a little bit to the group. So we got to get in touch with other people's needs, commit to pray for each other, and just to know that you're not alone in this, and each of us has a really unique story, and we're on different journeys, and yet the Camino is going to bring us all together,
Mhm.
and we're going to be yeah, standing with each other, praying together for each other, even though we're all over the place in different locations. We can have that connect point. Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
Mhm.
Just one thing that came to mind. We really hit body, mind, soul, spirit. Did anybody, and of course, no names or whatever specifics, but did anyone come with like, I've got this big vocational decision to make, or maybe I want to leave my job, ministry. I want to retire. Should I retire? Just these kind of vocational questions that people have, one way or the other. Maybe a fear of losing a job, and
Mm,
taking
Mhm.
that to God on this way trip.
Yeah.
Um,
yeah.
Yeah, interestingly, one of the participants had just lost his job.
Mhm.
So he was actually in not knowing if they could go because of finances and also because he's job hunting, which is like you got to stay on top of all that, right? And so yeah, they're that couple's at a very interesting crossroads right now. Another of the participants is in a PhD program and is, yeah, that next step after that PhD is done, what's down the road for her.
Mhm.
Another couple is just 1 year off the field after more than 2 decades of global work, now based in Texas and really still very much transitioning into US life after so many years overseas. So yeah, there was everybody had something.
Another couple was a pastor at church, and have some challenges with that, and
Mhm,
and just also supporting aging parents. So they're in that
mhm.
season as well, and trying to make some big decisions around that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Launching college kids. Two
Yeah.
of the couples had just launched a kid. So, yeah, all the transitions,
Mhm.
all the layers of it.
well, I'm going to say thank you. This has been absolutely great. I would love for you guys to write something up in our next newsletter in November that would perhaps give some of these details, addresses and stuff like that as well. We can add it into the show notes, but I think a lot of the people have got quite a mailing list now. But just to get this out to everyone and
Mhm.
talk further about what it means to go on Christian pilgrimage. And
Mhm.
I know we were in England for our 40th wedding anniversary with another couple that was celebrating their 50th. We would stumble across this one Celtic way, which was 126-mile uh, pilgrimage in Cornwall and Devon. So I kind of went from those two counties on the far southwest side of England, and maybe think about you guys and thought in those kinds of settings, and even as we would run across these churches that were upon that particular pilgrimage, I would often go into the churches and just by myself and just receive from the Lord, just be there with Him. And I thought, boy, this would be a wonderful thing to do too. So
Mhm.
Mhm.
I believe this is such a vital thing that we need to introduce more and more in our tradition, particularly evangelical Pentecostal tradition, and to glean out. And everything you've said is just so deeply, deeply beneficial.
Mm.
It's exciting.
Mhm.
I
Well,
didn't mention as you're talking, I forgot to mention, Mark, just the idea of sabbatical too. Like I know that you work with folks in sabbatical or wanting to engage in a sabbatical, and what a great component piece
Mhm.
of a sabbatical season this could be, to really step back and for a season of discernment, time and renewal and rest, and yeah. So I was just thinking sabbaticals we didn't really touch on, but that's uh, and then it's another area that the Way Between also works to incorporate sabbatical and facilitate these walks on the Camino as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, that is a huge one. And that word sabbatical doesn't often come up in our church tradition.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
No.
Uh, yeah, that's another theology. It's all over the Bible. But anyway,
Mhm.
it's gotten lost. And so I think it's time, the Lord is trying to revive a lot of these things that bring
Mm,
wholeness to us in every way. And
Mhm.
the old adage, it's better to burn out than to rust out. What a horrible, horrible saying. God
Mhm.
doesn't intend for either. He wants us in total
mm,
balance. And
Mhm.
looking at ourselves, body, mind, soul, spirit, and vocation leads to that. And what you've just explained about going on the Camino and with Christian pilgrimage, you've wrapped up all of that to us. And I think it's to be a wonderful way for us to be able to really hear from God and to be with one another and to discern our steps after the Camino. And then even if we're going on a sabbatical and the kind of things that we need to glean from that time of sabbatical that's
mm,
necessary.
mm.
So I'm going to thank you just for a great time today. And I know that a lot of people that will watch this on their own hour will definitely be blessed by it. So I'm sure we're going to get inundated with a lot of different things and questions about it. So I would like to have something with you, to write something with you to put it in our newsletter that I think could maybe be in a bit more detail than show notes even. So we'll
Mhm.
plan on that if it's okay with you.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Sounds great.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining us. And for those who review it later, so great to have you with us. And just a reminder, next month on Tuesday, November the 12th at 11 a.m., we're going to have Pastor Matt Thomas, who pastors Solid Rock Church here in Springfield, Missouri. And Matt is a pastor that is leading his church continuously through the church calendar. And we're going to be talking about the church calendar and our own spiritual formation and why following the church calendar, which begins at Advent, is a wonderful way for us to develop and grow our spiritual lives. So, Matt's a wonderful pastor and uniquely leads his church in ways that leads them to very deep, deep spiritual formation by following the church calendar. So, it's going to be great to hear from him. And so, with that, thank you everyone for joining us. God bless you. And see us on the Institute for Ministerial Wholeness website. It's iamwholeness.org. God bless you. We'll talk to you later. Bye.